Hi, thanks for joining us to learn about preparing your home for a wildfire. Fire is a force of nature, and there's no guarantee that your home will be unaffected. However, you can significantly increase your home's resilience to wildfire. Let's start by hearing from a Boulder homeowner who has begun this process.
Hi, I'm Jerry Eggleston. We live in beautiful Boulder. Obviously, we're very fortunate to have this back. We've been in this house about 16 years, and when we first moved in, we did an extensive remodel. At the time, a lot of the things we did were focused on maintenance, long-term reduction of maintenance. But it turns out a lot of the things we did were also very fire-wise. This beautiful blue spruce is actually not ours. It belongs to one of our neighbors. And this is an area where we have worked with our various neighbors. This is one example where originally the branches of this spruce drooped down and literally touched the ground all the way around. Initially, we removed the branches, limbed it up by our garden and out into the common area field here. And then working with our neighbor, he set a rope, which you can see around the trunk, and that rope was his indication that we could remove any of the branches below that rope, which we have done, to lift the branches, the combustible branches, up out of any combustible ground covering. Midsummer, these grasses will get up to 2, 3, even 4 feet tall. So when they start to cure out, when they dry enough to be a fire risk, a neighbor of ours and I go around and weed whack a boundary around not just this tree, but all of the evergreens that either encroach in or are already in our open space, our common area, to provide separation. So we whack them down to about 8 to 10 inches. Any lower and it invites weeds, but at 8 to 10 inches, the flame height off of that, nominally 4 times the fuel height, we've limbed up enough so that we have adequate fire separation. When we remodeled the house, we needed to replace most of the siding. And so while we were at it, we went with fiber cement siding, non-combustible fiber cement, rather than the composite board siding that's on most of the houses in the neighborhood and used to be on this house. So that gave us a great leg up in terms of fire-wise construction. We have since done a home assessment with Boulder Fire Rescue, and that assessment taught us a number of other things. Things about screening of nooks and crannies, moving vegetation, combustible vegetation away from the house, and that sort of thing. So one of the things that we learned from Boulder Fire Rescue and our home assessment was that embers are one of the biggest risks in any wildfire event. So they pointed out various areas where we might have ember traps. And some of them are things like vents. There's one up here high on the wall. That one happens to be a false vent, but if it were not, we would have screened that with a fine mesh metal screen. Fiberglass is combustible, so we don't go with that. But there are areas over here by the shed where we had a particular risk, and we screened that with some metal mesh. The roof of this shed underneath the deck has a bituminous waterproofing on it, and that is combustible. So on the recommendation of BFRD, we have screened that area off so embers can't be blown up and under and collect on that roof. Given this particular situation, because of the joints in the deck, every year I have to go through and clean out the leaves that have managed to get through, but nonetheless, it still gives us protection in the event of hopefully in the event of a fire. Originally, this deck was all wood, and it was old, it was dried out, and probably a significant fire risk. So when we remodeled the house, we replaced the decking with composite, which doesn't dry out, and also replaced all the railings with metal railings. Largely initially for maintenance purposes, but it turns out it really is helpful from a fire-wise standpoint. The landscaping back in this area was originally a lot of combustible bushes and gorilla hair shredded cedar mulch. And we've learned from the fire department that shredded cedar mulch is perhaps the worst possible mulch you could choose. It sends a creeping fire through that may go undetected, and even after the fire front has come through, can ignite things. So we have replaced the vegetation here with non-evergreens, which don't have the resin, so we've got lavender, and we've also replaced all the mulch with native rock. Here, just more of the area where we've replaced the bark mulch with native rock, and still dormant at this time of year, lavender bushes. You can also see that we have wood patio furniture. We really like the look. Unfortunately, it's a major maintenance issue, and it's also a fire hazard. So with the wood furniture, in the event of a fire, part of our preparation would be either to move this into the house or out into the field, or better yet, because of the maintenance issues with this, replace it with something that is non-combustible, which is on our to-do list. After our home fire assessment with Boulder Fire Rescue, this was actually the first mitigation effort that we tackled. This stump used to be about a 15-foot tall upright juniper. Major fire hazard because of all the resins in the juniper, not to mention that it was close to our fireplace chimney. So we've removed that, and this year we plan to replace it with a low-growing deciduous shrub in its stead. You can also see, or maybe you can't see because it's painted black, but we have put fine mesh screening underneath this overhang to keep embers from getting underneath and igniting the framing below. When we put solar panels on our roof a few years ago, before we could do that, we had to re-roof. So while we were at it, we changed the vent system. Right up at the very peak, you can see the tip of a ridge vent. We've eliminated the individual turtle vents, which didn't have very good ember screening in them. The ridge vent has a continuous ember screen along the entire length of it. And keeping embers out of the attic is critically important in protecting your home. One of the other things that we've learned over time is the importance for preparedness in evacuation. We were actually on pre-evac for the Flagstaff fire a few years ago. We were out of town at the time and drove all night to get here to do our evacuation prep. We've now learned a few things and have started to create go boxes. We're a ways from being complete on that. But one of the things we have done is to back up all of our computers onto thumb drives. This thumb drive is all of our important records, home inventory and everything else, insurance papers, you name it. And it's on my key ring, so I always have it with me. I never have to worry about going back to get it. As I've mentioned before, we work quite a bit with our neighbors. This is a very close-knit neighborhood. We're only 10 feet between houses in many cases. And so it's important to understand that our fire zones extend into our neighbors' yards, hence working with a neighbor on limbing up this spruce. But it also extends to what happens in the event of a fire. Many of people in this neighborhood are getting older, myself included, and so it's important for us in the event of an evacuation to check with our neighbors. We've worked out agreements with neighbors to check on their cats if they happen to be away, to try to get the cats out for them, vice versa for our dog. Anything like that to help our neighbors. And we have also been working, my background is as an architect, I've worked with a number of our neighbors about how to help mitigate their own homes. So this is really a community-wide effort. It's not just what we've done here on our house, but we and our neighbors are doing throughout the neighborhood.
Before we conclude, we'd like to recap and put an emphasis on certain items. First of all, these are 3 relatively inexpensive projects you can take on to improve the resilience of your home in a wildfire event. Cleaning your gutters, removing combustible debris from around your home, and replacing wood mulch with rockscaping are 3 relatively inexpensive projects that you can take on the weekend to improve the resilience of your home to a wildfire. In the home zone, moving firewood away from the house is important. Firewood stacks at least 30 feet from the home or into an enclosed area. Also, retrofitting wood fences where they meet your house is an important way to disrupt the fuse of a burning fence that could extend to your home. Especially in the area close to your home, consider planting fire-wise plant species. A list of fire-wise plant species can be found from the Colorado State Forest Service website. Also, remove the lower limbs of high-value trees in Zone 1. The recommendation is 8 to 10 feet, but this can be scaled based on the size of the tree. It's important that coniferous trees be spaced out an appropriate distance so that fire can't travel from one tree to another. The best source of information on appropriate canopy spacing can be obtained from your local agency performing a wildfire home assessment. Be sure to remove all combustible material from the area surrounding propane tanks. Replace those combustible materials with hardscape. It's vital that first responders are able to identify your address. Be sure that your driveway is marked with an easily visible reflective sign like the one in the picture. Thanks for joining us today for this overview of how to prepare your home for a wildfire. Everyone's property is different. To learn more about the specifics of how to best prepare your property, reach out to your local agency to request a wildfire home assessment. Thanks.